Welcome to All Schemes Considered, the weekly podcast where we dive deep on a startup and examine its viability as a business. It's a startup case study in about 25 minutes. I'm your host, Akash Shah.
And I'm your co-host, Sand.
Hi, we're talking about Digital Brain today. Digital Brain has raised $3.4 million since launching in 2019, and their latest round was a Series A for $3 million in August 2020. Digital Brain is the fastest customer support experience ever. They say they're like Superhuman for customer service agents. Superhuman is an incredibly fast, incredibly optimized email experience that costs $30 a month. And the way they justify this $30 a month is by being better than anything else out there. What Digital Brain is trying to do, they're trying to be such an optimized experience for handling customer support tickets and handling customer issues that it's a no-brainer to use their system.
I don't want to speak for every team, but of teams I've worked on and companies I've worked at, this is actually a huge problem for a lot of customer support teams because customer support can tend to get fractured and siloed in a way that sales and engineering don't always get fractured. That's a function of customer support being often a very cross-disciplinary focus or role at a company. You might need customer support representatives who are the front line. You might need junior level engineers who are the tier 2 escalation. And then you might need a way to link to the account in terms of like a renewal or a churn risk. And you might need a way to link to different engineering teams for bug resolution or deeper kind of structural issues. This might be valuable for a customer support team just because of how much friction a customer support person will feel in their day-to-day.
So customer support is a role that has to deal with a lot of disparate data sources and a lot of disparate stakeholders. If we're thinking about customer support for a piece of enterprise software, that customer support person has to deal with their customer support software, but they might also have to make some changes in whatever the engineering team's software queue is, or whatever the sales team's software is. And there's a lot of small actions that add up when it comes to handling this sort of communication. Do you think those small actions, do you think that's part of the reason that sometimes customer support tickets can take longer to accomplish?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Something I've seen in the past is you're a customer support representative. You're using the Salesforce customer support interface. You receive an email into your support inbox. What are your immediate priorities, right? You want to make the customer feel heard, so you want to respond to them. You normally want to respond with something useful. I think a good band-aid is just responding saying, hey, we received your request. But really, if you want a top-notch customer support experience, you want to respond with something that might immediately help them, which is generally some sort of boilerplate for common classes of issues. At the same time, if it's a deeper issue, you want to be able to notify your tier 2 support, or you want to be able to notify your engineering teams, which may use Jira or GitHub. Look at your workflow, right? You receive this email. You want an immediate response, right? You also need to see if it's a bug or if it's a real problem. I don't know of any developers who are super jazzed to use Salesforce Service Cloud. They're likely using GitHub or Jira or GitLab.
Some sort of separate ticketing system, which is associated with the code, but not associated with the customer.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so now answering and cataloging this ticket now takes easily 2 or 3 times as long as it should, because you have to interface with these different systems. And Service Cloud is kind of good to integrate with, obviously, Salesforce, but you can even envision a further layer of friction where they have to take this ticket and update the salesperson on the account. They have to modify a churn risk metric. I think Digital Brain's pitch is like, hey, you receive this email. It gives you a list of macros ready to go. If it's a bug, you click File Bug. It files that bug in Jira or GitHub with the appropriate tags and the appropriate repository. It kind of becomes a layer that sits on top of all these disparate systems and enables you to cut through that friction right away.
Yeah, I was trying to dig into like what would cause these sort of delays. What slows down a customer support agent? And it really seems to be the fact that a customer support agent might have to triage an issue, but triaging an issue means not just telling someone else to pick something up. It means, oh, I have to go digging in 3 or 4 different systems to identify what the problem is, and that takes a lot of time. And yes, what Digital Brain claims to do is exactly what you said, which is it builds a layer on top of all this software, and the customer support agent can stay in Digital Brain to interact with GitHub or Jira or Salesforce or Zendesk or even their own email without having to deal with the loss of time and the frustration that comes with switching tools all the time. And when you save a customer support agent time, that means you have a faster time to resolution for your customer support tickets, which means you have happier customers.
Right.
I see two core questions when it comes to Digital Brain's product. One, can they make an interface that is fast enough? And two, can they integrate with all these various disparate data sources? Let's just say right now it's GitHub, GitLab, Jira, Salesforce, and then whatever the top 3 support desk software out there is, which is probably like Zendesk and Freshdesk and some other desk, because all support help desk companies have desk in their name. Could they integrate with like these 10, 15 vendors that a customer support agent probably interacts with?
Yeah, definitely. So when you do these kind of Hydra-like API interconnectors and like middleware layers, where you end up getting mired in is just the breadth, like the actual space you have to cover in terms of like programming languages and APIs you have to know. It starts out easy and then becomes exponential, right? Because if you're just covering Salesforce's API, you can handle it. But then you're covering Freshdesk, you're covering Zendesk, you're covering GitHub. You start to have really good integration tests and end-to-end testing to make sure you're not falling behind anywhere. And that creates kind of exponential drag as your team has to pull forward all of these plugins and connectors and make sure they're always working.
But it's possible, right? With this $3 million in funding, Digital Brain could sit down for 3 months and build these integrations out.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in the beginning, you know, if you're proving out yourself as a startup, you say, okay, we'll only do Salesforce, GitHub, and Jira. You know, right. You just take the biggest players in the space and that'll give you a good enough client base. Right.
That makes sense. The other assumption we had was, is it possible to build a fast enough and pleasant enough experience? Can they make an app that's good enough? And I actually think yes. I just think in most business software, there isn't a focus on making a fast app or making a pleasurable to use application. And so if someone says that this is actually something that we want to focus on, it can become a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and the thing to remember with this interface is the worst case scenario for a middleware is not knowing if it worked or not. Even if Salesforce and GitHub and Jira's APIs are responding slowly, the user experience has to be such that the user knows an action has happened, is happening, or failed. Because the actual worst case scenario is the user's not sure and they have to go to these individual platforms to make sure everything got updated.
Yeah, it completely breaks the promise of Digital Brain, which is like, you don't have to leave. So there is going to be some struggle around reconciling how fast these third-party integrations are versus how fast Digital Brain is. But that's a problem Digital Brain can solve. It's not new science. It's not new research. It's been done before. Cool. So if they can create a fast enough application and if they can integrate with these external data sources, then that means the product fulfills its promise. If the product fulfills its promise and it's good enough, we've already said that this is a huge problem for support teams, which means, you know, there's a good product, there's people that want it, there's people that are willing to pay for it. How does Digital Brain find those people and get them to pay for it?
Honestly, outbound.
It's not SEO? Oh my goodness.
No, I was told I can't do SEO anymore. I have to be focused on SEO.
I think you're right. I think the reason we've seen outbound be so common is because outbound sales works for business to business sales. Think of it this way. Every startup has a choice not to do outbound sales. Every business to business company that is created has a choice to not do outbound sales. So the fact that they decide to do outbound sales every time means that it must work.
Well, it also makes a lot of sense. Let's say you and I founded a company, it's just the two of us. Outbound sales is initially going to have a huge ROI because if I land 3 deals just from messaging random people on LinkedIn, I've 10x our ARR, right? Which was 0, which is way faster than setting up a content marketing campaign, getting Google ads, waiting for your SEO links to juice up. You can do all that too, but your quickest ROI to proving the value of your startup is just, hey, would you buy this to your preferred customer profile? But it works because it's a low friction, high ROI thing to do as a founder initially when you're getting off the ground.
And it can scale if you consider scaling it creates money and can be reinvested in a repetitive process. Right. Okay, that makes sense. So Digital Brain would do outbound sales. Who do they do outbound sales to? Who controls the budget? Are there chief support officers? I don't think so.
It depends on how big the organization is, right? So at really big organizations, especially B2C organizations, there's usually a very large customer support division that would, you'd have a director or somebody who would have budget for this. At smaller B2B or startup companies, where you're looking at companies of 50 to 100 people, it may be handled by a customer success division or as a secondary or tertiary function of some other team. But you might still see value in it because even those companies typically have one or two or three dedicated customer support representatives who could stump for the product. Let's say a customer success director, and I'm much more concerned with renewals and upsells than I am with support as a general thing, right? I care about it in as much as it affects renewals and churn, not as its own separate division. If my customer support person comes to me and says, hey, I have this tool, it costs $30 a month per seat, and it'll increase my velocity 2x, I would authorize that budget.
If I was Digital Brain, I wouldn't sell this for $30 a seat.
Sorry, if the price point was sufficiently low, I wouldn't think of it as a bad purchase, or I wouldn't interrogate them. I'd say, hey, I trust my customer support rep.
But depending on price point, you could sell directly to the end of line user, or you could sell to a manager, or maybe even a director. Now,
right.
I think, and this is an assumption, I think because almost every company is unique when it comes to processes and practices, that the integrations between Digital Brain and these third-party data stores or services might require a lot of engineering effort and a lot of onboarding. There's a high integration time. And if there's a high integration time, that requires that whoever you're selling to has the ability to stomach a high integration time, has the ability to dedicate someone to make sure that this gets over the line, that type of stuff.
Yes, it'll be integration heavy. I don't think it'll be as bad as you're fearing, because I think this kind of middleware lends itself very well to a restricted vocabulary. You can imagine a simplified vocabulary that lets you do kind of task-based workflows, and that's very easy to conceive of and support. So you could say, okay, on this trigger, in this service, create this issue. It can be a very simplified vocabulary, and that's easy to model out in your third-party integrations. Not easy, but it's not a huge lift.
Right, but Digital Brain doesn't claim to only be a way to create tickets in other systems or a way to manage communication. It says it actually handles, to quote a press release, not to quote a press article on the company. In the case of canceling an order, Digital Brain would take all of the actions and update all of the records required by such a request.
Right, so you're just codifying the actions.
It's interacting with a database of actual customer data.
All of these are very task-based. They're not abstract. Ask the customer support person, hey, what do you do when somebody returns or cancels an order? And then codify that as a workflow.
So they do outbound, they find people that feel this pain. What type of person feels this pain? Obviously, every customer support agent feels this pain. We've recognized that there's going to be some integration costs. And if there's some integration costs, you have to go up the management chain to probably a director level. So what are the concerns of a director of customer support? To address whatever the volume of customer support tickets there are. And if there is an increase in the number of tickets, the customer support director can either increase the number of agents or they can increase the effectiveness of their agents. So it's possible that Digital Brain is saying, you don't need to hire 10 more agents. We can make all of your agents 10% more efficient. That is a very, very compelling sale.
Well, and they don't even claim 10%. Their actual pitch is get through your support tickets twice as fast. So if you're a director of customer support, if you have 10 customer support agents, and you're paying each of them 30, 40 grand a year, or whatever the going rate is for a customer support agent, you're potentially saving $300,000 to $400,000 using this product.
Really, the people that Digital Brain should be going after is people who have large enough customer support staff that Digital Brain could sell a $300,000 contract, because they're also going to reduce headcount by 15. And another benefit is anyone that has a customer support staff that's that large probably also has some budget for experimentation. Just something put aside to be like, how do we make it more efficient? Well, we could try this new tool, or well, we could tinker on this. Those are the people that Digital Brain wants to go for. What type of businesses or industries have large customer support staff, but also integrate with multiple complex data stores?
My brain naturally drifts to techie B2C companies. For example, a Shopify or these kinds of places where the product is a bit technical. There's probably a lot of interplay between customer support reps and junior engineers and senior backend engineers. But you also need a lot of customer support reps for the sheer size of your client base, which is consumers, right? So I think a natural place to start would be somewhere like Stripe or Shopify or these kinds of technical products.
So not something that's completely consumerized like e-commerce, but consumerized B2B, like what you were just saying, like Stripe or Shopify or Squarespace, where there's a subscription service and you're helping people, but there could be a lot of back and forth because it's not a one-off purchase that's pretty generic. There's a lot of places for something to get a little tricky. If I was Digital Brain, I would see how many help docs the company has. If the company has just an obscene amount of help docs, that is the company that Digital Brain should go after, because help docs are really good, well-managed help docs are a way that companies try and scale their customer support. I think we believe that there is enough companies out there of this sort.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. We've talked about the product. We've talked about the industry, the persona. We've talked about the acquisition process and even who they should target with their acquisition. Now let's decide. Do we think this company could reach $100 million in annual revenue?
Oh, definitely. Especially, there's a lot of natural land and expand strategies for a company like this. So I definitely think they could hit 100 million in revenue in the next 5 to 7 years.
Do you think they could hit 100 million in revenue entirely selling to customer support directors?
Maybe. Yes, but I would expect from a company like this, they would start to very quickly tentacle into complementary services because that'll make it much easier to grow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe their core product is good enough, but it's possible that we'd see them move down market with something that they sell to individual customer support agents, or we see them build complementary services that they can sell to other parts of the business organization.
Yeah, I think what they have, they could get to $100 million ARR with. I think they'll get there faster if they start to build complementary features around it.
I agree 100%. I think they're going to reach $100 million. I think they can do it. And to put some numbers behind it, to reach $100 million in annual revenue, that would be 1,000 accounts that were paying $100,000. Now that does seem like a lot, but when you combine the back and forth, when you combine the additional complementary services, when you combine it with the concept of moving a little down market and selling some cheaper accounts, it does make the 100 million possible and accessible. If Digital Brain is as good as they claim to be. There's always an execution risk. Is there anything we learned specifically, Zand? And what are our biggest takeaways?
It's a takeaway that we've experienced on the podcast before, but I think this is the definition of a well-scoped solution, right? I really enjoy startups who have a well-defined problem and a well-scoped solution. And I think the closer you can match your product exactly to a problem, the better off your chances are going to be at solving your revenue issue.
Because the tighter your scope is, the more you know about what problem you're solving. You can look at analogs and you can look at effectively playbooks, and you can learn from the people who have tried to do something similar before you.
Right.
I agree.
Exactly.
I agree for sure. Well, that's it for us today. We'll catch you guys next week. Adios.
Later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of All Schemes Considered. It means a lot to Zand and I. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and check out a few of our older episodes. We're available on our website, allschemesconsidered.com, and every podcatcher under the sun. If you really want to make our day, consider sharing it with a friend or coworker. If you have a scheme you'd like us to consider, a guest you'd like us to have on, maybe you just loved or hated this episode, we want to know your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at akash.io, that's AAKASH.DOTIO, or you can send an email to allschemesconsidered@akash.io. Zand, you can't find online because he doesn't believe in the digital public forum. I'd like to thank our supporters for helping support All Schemes Considered. If you'd like to support All Schemes Considered, you can start with the link in the description. At the very least, support us by not skipping past our sponsor messages.